is online, and we have
Recording in progress.
Hong Tran here as a member of the committee on my right, and we have Susan Honda next right over, a council member, and our council president Linda Kochmar over here on the left, and Jack Walsh is excused, he's out of town. And with that, I think we're ready to get going, and the first order of business is public comment. Is there any public comment that we have? No public comment? Okay. We'll now go to committee business. Is there any business anyone would like to bring up before we start? Okay, seeing none of that, we will go to the first item, which is item A, approval of the minutes of the September 9th, 2024 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I move approval of the minutes dated September 9th, 2024.
I'll second that. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, we'll now go to item B, substation sub-area plan approval. And Mr. Niven, I think you're the one doing it, correct?
Yes.
Because I don't see Ms. Stolman.
Lucy's in Boston.
Okay.
So yeah, you get me 3 times tonight, so hopefully that works. Good evening, Committee Chair Dovey, Committee Member Tran, Council President Kochmar, and Council Members Keith Niven, Community Services Director. So this evening we have a remand of the South Station sub-area plan back to the Land Use and Transportation Committee meeting after there were a number of comments made at the council meeting related to a particular business being displaced from the future alignment of the Tacoma Dome Link extension portion of Sound Transit's line. So since that time, we have met with representatives from DBM to have a conversation with them about what about the sub-area plan were they really unhappy about. And their answer at that meeting was that they did not have any concerns with the sub-area plan. They thought the sub-area plan was fine. What they don't like is the fact that Sound Transit has chosen an alignment that will take their business out. And so what we did is Brian Davis was put in charge of scheduling a meeting with Sound Transit and DBM because when the mayor asked the representatives from DBM if they had had conversations with Sound Transit, they said yes they had, but that they felt like those conversations were not very productive. And so the city felt like it had maybe the ability and the leverage to try and facilitate a better conversation between this particular business and Sound Transit. So that meeting is scheduled for the 18th for members of DBM and Sound Transit to have a conversation about the change in alignment and what that may or may mean for that particular business. So with that, let's talk about the sub-area plan. There were a number of questions that came up at council, and I thought I would go through kind of responses to those this evening, and then we can figure out what we want to do with this. So the policy question in front of the City Council is, should the City Council adopt the South Station sub-area plan? And one of the questions was, well, if the light rail station is not coming for another 10 years, why do this now? It seemed like maybe this was jumping the gun, going too quickly. And so the reasons why that we think that this is prudent to do now is, one, it gives us leverage with Sound Transit. One of the things that Sound Transit's board has made a decision on already is to not require parking for some of the future light rail stations. That was a cost savings measure that they did, I believe, maybe 2 years ago. Which is why we passed code in 2022 to require a minimum of 500 stalls with any station located in the city of Federal Way, trying to get leverage. What they also said is, based on the character of the area where the station is going to be located, they would choose parking configuration accordingly. And what that means is, in an area that is fairly suburban, like our South Station area, they would choose to put a 500 stall surface parking lot instead of a parking garage. And so one of the reasons why getting this sub-area plan adopted is we're establishing the vision we have for this part of the city to be a denser, kind of mixed-use, mid-rise area, similar to like our downtown area. The second is it gives us direction for code changes for this area. So as you know, a majority of this area is zoned commercial enterprise, which is our big box stores, storage units, tire sales places, kind of outdoor storage. And what we're wanting to do is to kind of sit down with property owners, talk about zoning details specifically, and then come back to the council with recommendation for some potential zoning changes. And that would be something we'd like to do in 2025. Number three, the adopted plan would give Parks, Public Works, and Lake Haven staff direction in planning for future capital projects. Specifically, I can talk about parks. We know that there's a neighborhood park deficiency in this part of Federal Way, and that was added to the capital plan. For Lake Haven, in talking with them, they have enough capacity for kind of some moderate redevelopment of this area, but if we do get mid-rise, they're going to need to start planning for bigger infrastructure projects on their capital list. And then number four is internal consistency issues. Right now we've got a comp plan moving through where we're kind of designating this as a kind of an urban center, similar to like our downtown area. And so if ultimately this plan gets put on the shelf for now, we're probably going to have to go back into the comprehensive plan and kind of work on some language to make sure there's not some inconsistencies there. And then I think overall, a delay in adoption would be disadvantageous for the city overall, and I can talk about that if you have questions. So this is your off-ramp right here. Is the proposed vision right? And the proposed vision, in a very short and concise phrase, is mid-rise, mixed-use, near a light rail station. If you guys think that that is the wrong vision for this part of the city, and we should explore other things, this is the off-ramp to not approve this plan, because the rest of the plan is really supporting that notion that when we get a light rail station in this part of Federal Way, we really should have some higher densities so that people can walk to the train station, less auto-oriented, and so this is really kind of the crux of this. If you think this is wrong, then let's talk about that. If you think this is right, then the rest of the plan is really just supporting this idea that this area needs to transition over the next 10 years and beyond. Can the city stop TDLE? The answer is no. TDLE was part of ST3, sorry for a lot of letters. So the vote that went for Sound Transit 3 to expand the light rail system in the Puget Sound area had the extension and the inclusion of South Station. So that vote went to the public already. It is in process, and I don't think we have the ability to not have a station in the south part of the city. So this is a drawing of the plan. You guys probably have not seen this level of detail yet, and I apologize to fit it in as big of a format as I can. North is kind of to the lower left. But as you can see, so right now, this street right here, this is 348th. This street right here is Enchanted Parkway. So as the tracks come from, this is kind of Red Lion is right at the corner of where it says Sheet. So Red Lion is right here. It's going to come across this intersection, and there's really been two alternatives for where the station is going to go. One is on the Corliss site, and that's on the north side of 352nd, and the other is on the DBM site, and that's on the south side of 352nd. But as you can see from this track alignment, this is already looking at basically pushing the alignment of this over to Pack Highway and not bring it back to I-5. And this is what's causing DBM. The issues that they're having is this is new, and I think they want an explanation of why that needed to happen. So here's the explanation. Basically, and I'll go ahead and read this. Adjoining St. George's Indian School, there had been a cemetery. Today, there is some evidence to indicate that a cemetery existed in connection with St. George's School. It's estimated that at one time about 250 persons were buried there. Records indicate that Indians, nuns, and pioneers were buried in the cemetery until the early 1920s. The exact burial plot, location, and the identity of most of those interred is sketchy at best. So this is the concern that Sound Transit has, is basically there's an unmarked burial ground in the south part of Federal Way, and their original plans were to put tracks through it. And so as you start to think about doing borings for the support structures for those tracks, I think the concern that they had and that the Puyallup tribe has expressed is that this was unacceptable. And so that's why the change, and that's why they are now looking at alignment on Pack Highway, where originally that was not one of the kind of the ideas they were looking at because of feedback they got from the residents of Federal Way. So this is reality, and this is, I think, what is scaring them to push it over to Pack Highway. And whether DBM is happy or not with this, I think this is the way that this is likely going. So, will the plan adoption cause businesses or residents displacement? The answer is no. And the reason why I say no is even if we were to rezone property, none of that requires a property owner to leave or to sell or to change what they have going on there now. So that can continue as basically a legally non-conforming use forever. And so I think this idea that as soon as we adopt the plan, that people are going to get pushed out is not fact. And then would businesses need to close or relocate? That's the same thing. No. So what are we going to do with this? One option is we return the draft sub-area plan to council. We can keep it in committee. There's an option 1B. And then if not either of those, I think the question is, what would you like us to do? And that is the end of my presentation.
Okay, council, any questions? Councilmember Daniel.
Yeah, apologies for being late today.
No worries. Apologies for being on time.
Hey. Totally understand where you guys are going with this one. I've heard that before. I've also heard there's problems with crossing the Puyallup River down the road anyways, so there's more issues coming up. I'm assuming that the Sound Transit can eminent domain on the Indian property then?
That's a great question. And unfortunately, we have no legal counsel. Do you have an answer?
So,
The non-legal one?
yeah, so I'm not the attorney. In short, the answer is yes, they can. That's the same way I-5 was constructed back in the day. That being said, it does not follow the state eminent domain. It actually follows the federal eminent domain process. And it's a very long, extensive process that actually goes through the Bureau of Indian Affairs, which is a federal department. But there is a process to use eminent domain through it. But they still have to meet all the environmental, which there's some skepticism that would actually be able to be met. So to answer your question bluntly, yes, there is a process.
It's possible, not probable.
Correct.
Gotcha. The second question I had was on the actual position. I know we've shown 3 or 4. It looks like that's pretty much, we're assuming they're going to go with it. At one point, I know people had talked about Jet Chevrolet being an option, and then also crossing I-5 and coming on the other side down. Have both of those been determined not to be viable options?
So Jet Chevrolet leads you to either the problem on the west side of I-5, which is the Indian burial ground, or the problem on the east side of I-5 if it were to cross over I-5. and go down the east side, they think that the burial ground extends beyond I-5, which is why I-5, I think they've been suing Federal Highway Administration over I-5.
There's a question on how many bodies and where exactly the bodies were positioned.
Exactly. The farthest away you can get without going out into Puget Sound is Pack Highway becomes the best alternative, I think, for them, if their highest priority or one of their highest priorities is to avoid any unmarked remains during excavation.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So the sub-area plan by itself won't have an impact on the businesses.
It will not.
The businesses would have to agree to any changes.
So the businesses that are there now, so I'll answer it maybe a little bit more nuanced. Some of those businesses are tenants in property owned by someone else, right? And you can look at the Crossing Shopping Mall, those businesses like Panda Express and Biscuits, they don't own that property. They lease that building from the landlord. There are landlords, so like we could, if we adopt this plan, and let's say in a year we get a zoning code change, which allows for mid-rise mixed use, the Fana Group, who owns that property, they could choose to start to redevelop portions of their property in advance of Sound Transit coming in. And if that were the case, then similar to like we have with the Commons, the Fana Group would either exercise existing retail contracts and say, you know what, we'll buy you out, or they would wait for them to sunset and then not fill them and, you know, contemplate redevelopment, you know, once those spaces were available.
Okay. So I had heard that there's a roundabout is supposed to be put in that area. Is that still going in, that the state was going to put
The
that in?
WashDOT roundabout at 3. I have traffic people here if you want to, if you have questions.
So does that impact this plan at all?
It does not. There's actually, we have exhibits in the sub-area plan for the WashDOT roundabout. The funding on that is not guaranteed at this point, so the timeline is not well known. I think somebody suggested that maybe the new church down south of the high school might help fund that roundabout, given the traffic impact they may have.
Well,
Again.
since the roundabout was planned long before that church, I don't know why that would be necessary for the church, but that my other question is on Sound Transit itself and where they're coming to get to their new station, wherever that might be. Have we done any studies in the downtown area of what impact we have had on the tax base here in Federal Way with Sound Transit displacing the businesses that were there, and the fact that several of the businesses still are impacted by the construction and don't have the business that they used to have? And how that will impact this area?
So those are great questions. You know, embedded in that is, does the construction impacts for those businesses that aren't taken ultimately cause significant hardship for those that remain? Unfortunately, the sales tax information we get from the state is fairly, it's stratified and not very business specific. So although we can tell you kind of how much the sales tax might have gone up or down citywide or even by industry, it's not at a granular level to by business. What I can tell you is that we did just get property tax data from the assessor, and our property taxes have gone up to the point where our TIF district generated like $21,000. So that was the first year. It's going to grow exponentially from there. So take the first year. So I think what I can tell you is property values have gone up within that area around the station. Whether or not the value of existing businesses and whether their sales have, like for example, like is Marlene's, have they been impacted because of all the impacts of Sound Transit? I don't know the answer to that. That might be a great question for Tanya, to explore and talk to the businesses about that. I know she's been very frustrated with Sound Transit's kind of responsiveness to business complaints, feeling like they have not done a great job.
I've heard that from businesses.
Yeah.
And I just don't want to repeat what, there's a lot of businesses that will be impacted, not only by a new sub-area plan that we might be working on, but by Sound Transit ripping things out and disrupting traffic, and it's already difficult to get around in that area.
Totally agree.
So-
And, some of the very generic policies that Sound Transit has in terms of like, for example, no businesses. So basically that section of track I showed you in that plan from 348 down to DBM, it's all elevated. It's going to stay elevated all the way down to the south end of Federal Way. And they generally don't allow for any buildings underneath their track. So that just creates like this dead corridor, right, of elevated track and kind of fencing. And so, having a plan like this, again, allows us to have conversations about, whether or not we can push for any changes in their policies. Because you might have some businesses that might just get clipped a little corner and they may not care. It's like, I don't care if the train goes over every 15 minutes, as long as it doesn't fall on our roof, we're good. So I think right now, again, looking for more leverage with Sound Transit, I think is good for the city.
And for DBM, or even Corliss, I know it was at the last meeting, we'll help you find someplace in Federal Way, but realistically, where would that be?
So we just rezoned a piece of property on the north side of 320th, east of Pepe Kenworth, to CE. It's vacant. So like if DBM was looking for property to relocate into, the South King Fires property on the north side of 320th would be, I think, an ideal place for them. Because most of their work is not in Federal Way, they're a contractor, they work. So having that access to the freeway would probably be good. And, in theory, they could buy that property now, and whatever carrying costs they have for the next 10 years till they get bought out, they can charge all that to Sound Transit. So this really, from a business standpoint, you got to be able to spend like $17 million to buy that property. But if they had the resources to do that, is there a place in Federal Way? Absolutely. It's on 320th on the north side.
And they've been informed of that.
I think Tanya's talking to them about that.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Council President Scottsbur?
Oh, could you tell me where the sub-area plan is in the comprehensive plan?
So the sub-area plan is technically not in the comprehensive plan. It's identified by reference
Okay.
in Chapter 7, which is the Centers chapter. And if you look at the Centers chapter is broken into the Regional Growth Center, which is kind of our downtown, and then the Countywide Center, this is the Countywide Center is part of the sub-area.
Last question, how long will all this, before we really actually have a station there?
It's supposed, right now, it's supposed to be 2035.
Thank you.
Councilmember McDaniel?
Just to add a little information to Councilmember Honda, if you look at the FEDRAC reports, it does break out by areas for sales tax, and the largest sales tax is this area, so it's our largest sales tax revenue generator. And the other one is I've talked to some businesses in that area, they estimate about 30% loss. So.
Okay, so I have a couple questions, if I may. When you talk about the vision statement, mid-rise,
Mixed use.
yeah, why wouldn't we make that mid-rise, high-rise and not limit ourselves to mid-rise?
So I think that, so what we did in the downtown is we put we changed our zoning code to allow for a maximum FAR of 10. And so 10 is basically a 10-story building over the entire parcel, or a 20-story building over half the parcel, or a 40-story building over a quarter of the parcel. So just because the overall vision might be mid-rise, depending on the details of the zoning. So for example, if we put the same zoning as downtown down here, you could, with that same 10 FAR, you could get a 40-story building. It doesn't mean that that would be inconsistent. It'd be overall, probably most of it would be lower than that. But if you had one property owner that was really, wanting to push the market, maybe you can get a view of something from there if you go high enough. So I don't think that's inconsistent is to allow for taller buildings, even though the overall vision might be mid-rise.
Right, but I guess we are now in the point where we're naming something, and if the name becomes mid-rise, and somebody wanted to do 10 stories, because that's not mid-rise. Mid-rise is what, 4 over?
Five over 1 or 2, so
Yeah.
seven floors is about a mid-rise.
So it just seems to me if you just call it mid-rise, you're limiting yourself on what a developer could do if they wanted to on their land, because we're saying mid-rise now, and it really is not mid-rise. It could be 40 stories if it was our zoning, or could be 10 or whatever, and it just seems mid-rise limits what it could be. And I don't know, that's just my wordsmithing on what you said.
Sure, no, and if ultimately the council wanted to take that potential limitation off, I think that's easy enough to do.
Okay. The second thing, you showed the alignment going by the red lion.
Yeah.
Does that mean that if that alignment happens, that building will disappear?
No, they're painstakingly missing that building. So it's.
By how much?
So
How
it's
many
it's
feet?
gonna blaze through the Walmart parking lot, and it's gonna go kind of past the southwest corner of the Red Lion. So it won't. They're trying not to hit that building.
Can we make a rule that you have to, buildings can't be closer than 100 feet of the overhead, since you,
It takes out Denny's? Does it take out Denny's?
yeah, take out Denny's, wouldn't it?
I don't know. Does it take out? EJ nodding his head. Yes.
So then would it take out those smaller fast food places in the Walmart parking lot? There's quite a few of them.
I don't know I don't think so.
No, it doesn't, it's southeast of
Yeah.
that.
Can't move it like 10 feet one way or something?
So
Okay.
they,
Never
so they
mind.
do
Okay.
not have condemnation over the Red Lion Authority because that's a county facility. That's actually really, the original alignment did actually go through the hotel, but since the county owns that property, they don't have condemnation authority there.
Maybe
Why-
King
why is that?
County have a budget shortfall and they want the money back.
So why they can get our property if they want to.
Correct.
They can get Indian property if they want to, but they can't get county property?
They're the same level of government. Yes, correct. So they cannot condemn the county properties.
Okay.
They can't condemn state either,
Okay.
if that
And
matters.
I guess my last question is, you said the owners won't be affected per se, because they're in selling their property or whatever. But following, I think Councilmember Honda was alluding to this, that the owners won't be affected because they're going to be able to sell their property for more money than they would have if we don't do this.
Right.
But the renters
Yep.
are subject to their lease term, and an owner may say, hey, I don't want to renew it because I'm going to do something better, which they can do, but you are affecting the small businesses unless there's some sort of clause that says you have to give terms or something in there so they could stay if they wanted to. And I don't know how you would do that, but the owners truly won't be affected. It's just the small businesses that have a lease, or, they only have a 10-year lease because they didn't want to have a 20-year lease, and things like that.
Sure. So smaller things like, Thai Bistro or maybe Panda Express, those things could relocate in a new building, if you built a mid-rise building with ground floor retail space, some of those kind of smaller restaurants could locate in that ground floor space. It gets harder the bigger you get. So as you get to like a Biscuits, are they talking to Sherry's right now, the owner of the empty Sherry's? The trampoline place, if it gets hit, they're probably not going to find another location in the city.
Well,
So it's the smaller easier it is for them to find a replacement place. It's the middle-size businesses that are going to be hard pressed to find something.
And they
else to
will,
lease.
they will be hard pressed, but I guess my point is, I don't think in 2035, anybody up here is going to be sitting here. Okay? I mean, that's a long time from now. I mean, so let's assume nobody's sitting here in 2035 when this all takes place that we're doing now. And if we haven't done the foresight that says, in this sub-area zone, there's preferences, whatever it is, to the businesses that are there and working, then we're just kicking the can down the law. And you might not even be here, and I remember the discussion, and I think in that sub-area, I guess I'm more convinced to pass it on so we can discuss it. But I think we have to have something in our comp plan or something noted or something that we pass. And I know we can't bound future councils, but if we're not willing to give direction now, if we're going to do this, I think we're not being fair to those businesses that, are, trying to make it every day now. And they may go out on their own, and that's but we don't want to force them out if they still want to be in business.
Sure.
I mean, could something like that be put into the plan,
Yeah, absolutely.
Council
I just want to know
President?
exactly where is the, hopefully, high-rise transit garage going to be? Exactly.
So we don't know today
That's.
because
It
it's
could
either.
be anywhere.
I know.
So it's either going to be, if they end up, so right now, we believe that the preferred station location will either be on Corliss or DBM. And so the garage will either be on Corliss or DBM next to the station.
At $2,000 a door for a parks fund, you get $1,000, if we can build a park. Anyway,
I have another question.
yes, Councilmember Honda.
So, in the recent past, Sound Transit had an issue with following through on ST2, which was a bond issue to build garages down in Canton, Auburn, and there are other things too. And those are, they're still working on those. So this is 3, not 2. This is part of Plan 3. And what happens if we have another recession and the money doesn't come in that they need to build, and then we're looking not at 15 year or 11 years out, but we're looking at 21 years outer? What impact would that have on this sub-area plan, if any?
I don't think, so if we've done our work right, and this thing will evolve over that 20-year period, if it ends up being 20 years and not 10. But as we start to see how things change, I think we should continue to kind of work on, polishing this up so that by the time the station comes in, we've set the city up to be as beneficial as possible. I mean, I started working for the city in 21. I think the downtown station was supposed to open in 24.
23.
It's now 26. So I've not gotten any closer since I've been here to it actually being open. So the likelihood that this is not 10 years out, it's longer than 10 years, is probably real. And so what I would say is that if we've done the plan right, one of the things that we don't know is if we were to rezone property in this area, because right now this property, other than permanent supportive housing, doesn't allow housing at all. And so as soon as we change the zoning and potentially allow housing in this area, you could see properties start to redevelop with new housing opportunities just because there's such a latent demand for housing in our community right now. So without necessarily taking out, the big sales tax, behemoths that we have in this part of the city. So it may do a lot of things before the station actually gets here, just because of just change the way we would affect the market by just changing the zoning.
So the station is gonna come first, and then it's sometime after that, the parking garage is gonna come? That was a while ago that we had talked about that?
So EJ, feel free to jump in if I'm misrepresenting this. I believe that they will build the station and the garage in similar timeframes, so that by the time the station's open, the parking is there to service it.
So the code that we passed a couple of years ago, that was what was originally in code. The code that Sound Transit proposed that the city council adopted allows them to build a surface lot with approval of the city for a period of time and then bring the parking garage on in the future. They have an obligation to build a parking garage at a timeline. I forget exactly how it was wordsmithed, but at a timeline that's agreeable within the development agreement, but they do not need to have the parking garage online when they open the station. That is basically the same agreement that City of Kent used for the Sounder Station, which is the project I think you referenced a little earlier, Councilmember Honda, that they're just breaking ground on now.
Wow.
So whether those timelines line up to be the same as what happened in Kent or not with the Sounder, I obviously can't speak to. But there is a provision in code that allows them, with the city's concurrence, to delay building the parking garage at this point, because the original proposal that was put in front before Sound Transit objected to it was to require exactly what Keith said, require the parking garage to be done at the same time as the station. And then they being Sound Transit, objected to that publicly, and that's where it landed.
Thank you.
Councilman?
Yeah, back to what Chair had mentioned earlier, I appreciate the thought of what the small guys are gonna be like, because I'm one of the small guys who's blasted out in this project. So I'd appreciate it if we did have that little longer conversation. I mean, it is 10 years out. I hope to be in business in 10 years still, but I've been in there for 23 years, and it's probably, the reason I'm there is because it's a great place, minus some transients every now and then, but the rent's been great, and it's kept me in business, so I'd appreciate that longer discussion on that. Thank you for thinking of us.
So Keith, if we were to move this from committee to a council meeting, not in October, but the 1st of November, and we had it on council business, do you think you could craft some of these questions into it so that, or so it would be acceptable?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
So, and I wonder, can we pass an ordinance that says that they can't pass that close to the Red Lion or take out the Red Lion? I mean, what kind of an ordinance can we pass that would alleviate our problem here?
Call up Dow.
Yeah. The Red Lion's been sitting there for 3 years, fairly empty, minus a little bit of use in the interim. But I don't know what's going on with the Red Lion. We had a meeting with them, with King County about 2 months ago. And, Kelly Ryder was, we got to get this open as soon as possible. And nothing's happened since then. So it is what it is. Yeah.
Thanks.
Okay. Do we have a motion?
Chair Dovey, I move to forward the proposed South Station sub-area plan to the November 5th, 2024 City Council Business Agenda for approval.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now we'll move on to item C, South Surface Water Management CIP project authorization to acquire maintenance equipment.
I can promise you this is far less exciting. Good evening, members of council. For the record, E.J. Walsh, Public Works Director. I am before you tonight to discuss the Surface Water Management Small Capital Improvement Program, or CIP project, which is authorization to acquire maintenance equipment, as Chair Dovey mentioned. The slide advances will be set. So the policy question is, should City Council authorize the 2024 small CIP project acquiring maintenance equipment for the surface water utility? So as background, within the adopted surface water management or CIP, there's a project identified as small CIP project, very creatively named. And the overall development of that project was to be a combination of reactive needs for the city based on what we see in a given year. So by the project definition, that includes small capital projects. So we've done everything from replace catch basins to slip line pipes with this. Contracted major maintenance, so we've used this, last year we used it for fence repair around a number of the regional stormwater facilities, and also to enhance the city's maintenance capabilities. So that historically has been done through purchasing of equipment. This is the fund 2 years ago that purchased the mulcher head that we've been using to clear out invasive species and stormwater facilities. It's funded from the SWIM CIP program at $150,000 per year as an annual project. So this year, after reviewing with staff, we went back and forth with 2 items. One was repairing a number of storm structures in Pack Highway, specifically the north end of the city. We've been working on design of that, and frankly, we've been doing the design in-house. We are not at the point that that project's ready to go out on the street yet, and we will not have the ability to complete that this year. So what we're proposing, and that has not been before council previously, but what we're proposing is to effectively, that small CIP, to make that the 2025 project, the catch basin repair project, and this year to enhance our maintenance ability, specifically by purchasing a chipper. So as a city, we have one much smaller chipper than this. The Parks Department has a chipper. So Parks uses it the most. Surface Water uses it the second most. We use it basically every day they're not using their chipper, mainly in stormwater ponds, but we also use it on the roadways in the ditch program, as well as in conservation properties when we have to go into them to clear trails or whatever the case may be. So specifically, the chipper we're looking at is an AX19 from Vermeer. That it's available on state contract. You can see from the picture, it's definitely a larger machine. It is capable of being fed both by a second machine, aka a backhoe, or by hand, which is why it's the size it is. These are not cheap. Even the ones Parks has is close to this price. These are expensive pieces of equipment. They do have long lifespans. That's the positive. So this cost is $178,000. We are proposing to fund the delta out of the unallocated SWIM CIP fund right now. So the options before council is to authorize the 2024 SWIM small CIP project acquiring equipment for the surface water utility, or option 2 is to do not authorize purchase and provide direction to staff. The mayor's recommendation is option 1. And here is a picture that the vendor sent us, the Vermeer, the builder, of an actual one out in the field to give you a little better size of scale compared to the first one. With that, I am happy to answer any questions.
What's the delivery time?
So there are 3 of them sitting in Tacoma ready to go. So they can have it to us by November 1st if it goes to the council meeting on the state contract. Outside of that, there are multiple more that can be delivered in December. So we can have it by the end of the year. That's part of the reason we're specifically using this equipment. And this is something we should have purchased years ago, so it's cleanup.
Thank you.
Oh,
So you're going to the blue light, so.
Thank you. You know, going through the budget, I know that we're looking at uncertain times coming up, and, well, we're there already. And this is a large piece of equipment. Is this completely 100% necessary that will make your job easier and better for the city, or is this something that, is it more of a want than a need?
No, as I mentioned, this is something we should have bought years ago, and we just put it off and put it off in the priority list. I mean, we, like I said, as a city, we own one chipper that's in parks. This is not general fund money, which, to your point, this is restricted surface water utility money. So we couldn't take this money and do something different with it. We typically what we do right now is. If Parks Department's using their chipper and we don't have it available, we load everything into dump trucks and bring it back to the maintenance yard in whole, and it just sits there until we can get the Parks chipper. So the result that we're using right now is there's a lot of extra labor that goes into this. And frankly, if the Parks chipper goes down, there is no backup. So ideally, most cities our size have 3 or 4 of these. I would say having 2 is probably the bare minimum that we should have had years ago.
Most cities have far more things than we have.
They do, absolutely. You're 100% correct.
All right, thank you. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah. No, it's a good question. I appreciate it.
Okay, is there a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move to forward the option 1 to the November 15, 2024 consent agenda for approval.
I will second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay, now we're going to talk about, the rest of them are information. So briefing on the SeaTac Airport Master Plan process. Bill Vedino.
Chair Dovey and LUTC members, I'm looking for my show here. What'd I do, Sarah? Let's see. I go below.
You can go to folders, comment, Bill. You can find it that way.
Folders? Right there, just folder?
Yeah, go to comment.
Comment. Oh, okay. I thought I had it up on the deal, the quickie deal.
Desktop, but you can get there that way. OETC, chamber presentation,
Chambers. Sorry for the delay, everybody.
2024.
2024. LUTC. October. It's October already? Jeez. Open.
Get a raise.
Yeah, we got you somebody else, Thomas. So, thank you for your patience. I wanted to bring you up to speed as we've been trying to keep you up to speed day by day on what's going on with the SEA, as known as SeaTac Airport SAM process. And we are now, the clock has started on the run-up to the National Environmental Policy Act version of the situation. And so basically, they've given us 30 days notice, and what's nice is they've gone from 30, they've been accommodating. The Admiral and his team, Admiral Metric, has given us a 45-day outreach process, which begins the 21st of October, ends December 5th, and when it was usually 30. So, and as we've talked many times before, passengers are going to go up from 46.9 million to 66 million. In 2024, and that's going to result in greater noise and health impacts on our residents and the other 6 cities and the people to the north. And so this SAM plan, here we go, it's going to give us, as we've talked before, 19 additional gates, a new passenger terminal on the existing main entrance road near the garages, high-speed taxiway turnoffs, added cargo facilities, 30 other projects. And what this includes, and you see that in the yellow, is Chris from the Marine Hills neighborhood, he discovered when they were writing up the plan for us when this would finally happen, that Overpack Highway, the first runway, 16 right, it is coming in at 2.75 degrees, more shallow than the other 2 runways. And it's supposed to be 3 degrees. And so part of what they're going to do with this construction is bring the runway that's Overpack Highway, Steel Lake, those neighborhoods, up to 3 degrees. It's a matter of changing some taxiways. So that's a good plus for us, but for some reason, no one knew about it. I'm looking at my father's airport maps from 1965. I think it's on there as 2.75 as well, too. So that's B-17 C3s. And so that's a little bit of relief. And I think as some of our pilots would tell us, that doesn't seem like a lot of degrees, but that's part of the project, too. So there's something directly benefiting Federal Way. we've looked at this before. Basically, we're now in that NEPA process that is going the late quarter here of 2024. Then in the spring, we'll be looking at the state project. So here's our comment opportunities. And number one, because you all raised your voices when Dave was here from the port, and the mayor sent an email on behalf of yourselves to Admiral Metric. Basically, we have the first public meeting on November 12th. The other ones were scheduled for the other 3 coastal airport cities, but we raised our hand and said, we're impacted. So we have the first meeting. What they also have besides that meeting is there'll be the ability, and we will get this out to the public, to email. They've got a listserv of subscribers. They've got a sample website, which doesn't open until October 21. I wanted to preview you for it, but it wasn't there. And their materials are going to be in these 6 languages. Simple Chinese, by the way. That's what they told us. So what we're going to do with your help and your input today, and we can make this a better plan, is how are we going to let our residents know? Well, number one, of course, the Citywide News, which is up to something like almost 14,000 subscribers, which is good. But those are people pretty much in the Beltway. We've got our email list, which is pretty much incorporated in there. Then there's our social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. And then we're going to get the Mirror involved. Okay, Keelan's already up to speed on what's going on. She watched Dave Kaplan. She's got his information, but we can continue to let the Mirror know of our concerns. So our advocacy avenues are, of course, mayor and city council communications. In the past, you folks have written several letters, things that have a lot of impact on the commission about what needs to be done, and we're going to formulate that. The senior commission and the other commissions, we can get them ramped up to testify, to send documents, to say, hey, this is impacting our people. And as you saw from what the mayor wrote on your behalf that you all helped out with to the Admiral, was we are people who have a lot of people in apartments. They have 2 or 3 jobs, they're single parents, different languages. We speak over 100 languages. We need a process where these folks can talk about what they may not have time to talk about, which is the noise and the particulates and all the impacts, because we're talking about more gates, more flights, and you see how that's going. So then, of course, there's our nonprofits that they do support some nonprofits, which is great. They're reaching out to them to get input. But we also want to go directly to all of our nonprofits that help our community to say, hey, what are your members? What are the people at the food bank think, et cetera, et cetera. And then, of course, through economic development, business outreach, because businesses are impacted as well too. So what I wanted to do, and I think I misspelled dialogue here, is talk about briefly here, and then we'll work on it in the next month for us to talk about at the first meeting at the LUTC, and then go to council, and then make our major statement as these meetings are happening. We need to figure out the best ways to advocate for possible solutions to noise challenges. We need to advocate for possible solutions for emissions and ultrafine particle abatement. Solutions to late night noise. Right now, late night noise is an optional volunteer program, and you know what? If we're going to have all these flights and they're going to be at night, and it's our commerce with the Far East and other places, we have to figure out what we can do for that. And then, of course, there will be. I was just on the line with the federal. There's a federal group committee with START. You know, the 6 cities, and actually that's a very effective committee. And Adam Smith and other representatives are very much keyed into what do we do about noise. For instance, I alluded to in the last couple presentations. We're part of the Part 150 process, and that's where federal funds are available for installation and other situations to help. However, Part 150 is not about, it's about an average, not about volume. So if we have double the planes flying over, if they're sort of at a average noise level, which I think does not govern what we're trying to do for our residents, it's just an average. And so at the federal level, they're advocating for a new noise standard to make insulation and air purifiers and other things adapted. So now from the state legislative advocacy piece, and we'll go into more detail later, Mike Pelliciotti and other people in this legislative district and others did have a bill that basically said the airport impacts need to be taken care of within the 6-city area, including Federal Way. There's no money, there's no clout. However, at the last legislative session, and we can put this into our state legislative agenda is CTAC and others proposed a bill that would basically say, for the 6 cities, the port needs to use their finances to take care of insulation and noise and particulates, okay? Well, that bill got amended to the point that right now it is just for the failed packages that aren't being funded by anybody else. So right now, it's set a precedent, though, that the port funds from the state can say, you need to use these funds for abatement. So right now, they're surveying the people with the failed port packages. There's a question of whether that's a use of government funds. But there is an opening for, if the state can tell them at least with that area around the airport, perhaps we can get that legislation back to where it covered all 6 cities. So there's different avenues that we can work with. So I was gonna say, if you have any suggestions at this meeting, we can continue to dialogue without, doing a public meeting on email. I'm coming up with all sorts of ways that we can do this. But the main thing is, you saw what we did with Admiral Metric. We know that Lance, the airport manager, he comes to our events. He had his family at Taste of Federal Way, and they do talk to us, and they do are concerned about us. And so, like with us getting our meeting, there are ways for us to deal with them in a non-confrontational, frank manner as neighbors, just saying, what can we do about having air purifiers in our schools? Because the ones that are there for COVID are failing. And right now, they're basically helping take care of the ultrafine particles. What can we do about windows in businesses and schools? What can we do about people inside their homes? Then, of course, there's the issue of quiet enjoyment of a barbecue at night. But what can we do about where the planes are routed at certain times? And because this is a lot more volume. So there's a whole bunch of areas we can go working with them as side by side versus, being confrontational. So over the next month, my mission is to come back to this meeting with a bunch of other strategies that are done in other cities that you've worked on before, because a lot of you have been at this panel before talking about airports since, the plan was put together in 2017 by the Marine Hills residents and other people. So that's my mission for the next month. And so any comments at this point, or pointers, or any other pieces of information, but we do have that public meeting. We have the way to mobilize our people, and that's what we'll do to get them to comment as much as possible. Now, this is the national environmental impact statement, as many of you know because of all your experience. The state one is in the spring, and that will be even more effective, and we'll basically have a dry run with working on the national piece, because that's the FAA. But then with the state, we've got a bigger audience. And at the end of the day, I won't put their pictures up there, we've got 5, our last piece is the 5 people on the commission. And they're the voice of the voiceless. And at least 3 of them have been in our living rooms and our schools over the last 5 years, seeing what's going on. One commissioner was actually at Nautilus getting an interpretation of what the air purifiers and what the windows would do. So it's gonna come down to the 5. And that's what we're going to do through the NEPA, through the SEPA, and through that. So, but that's what I have. Any comments or questions?
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you.
Yes.
November 12th, many of us won't be here.
True.
So will this meeting be online so that we can,
I'll double check. I believe we can do it. So if they're not online, we'll be online.
okay,
Okay. And then, of course, with us mobilizing our commissions,
Right.
our nonprofits, our business people, that's going to have a huge impact. And then with us maybe having a statement that's read, approved by council at that point about where we're at. That's something that I might have to.
it's an interesting week to have meetings with cities when it's a National League of Cities Conference week.
True.
It's a very interesting week.
But what's great is our sincerity and our real people showing up will make an impact.
Correct.
So, which is good.
So I would say maybe if you could come to the senior commission meeting and give a little update there, that
Oh
would
yes,
be great.
they've been waiting for me for years to talk about this.
Well,
And
I think
if
it's
they've got
been a couple
full agenda,
months,
we're
but
going to
yeah.
give them we're going to do the full written thing. They
Okay.
were briefed on this, what was it, a year ago and 2 years ago?
No, it was last year sometime.
Yeah, it was last year sometime.
Yeah.
And used the LUTC thing. So they're very primed to go, and I think diversity and human services is just a lot of commissions, arts,
Okay,
we can get them mobilized. I think
Thank
it's
you.
great, and we'll need your help to do that, too.
thanks.
Council President? Council President?
Thank you, Chair. Let's see, I was a member of the Airport Communities Coalition Committee,
You were.
probably for 10 years. Where I mean, we've been talking about this since the dark ages. Same stuff. And I think beyond being unbelievably frustrated, we still talk about the same stuff. So we did have decibel meters. We had some kind of decibel where you could register the noise in different areas, especially around Marine Hills, around Federal High School. I don't know if those are still active or not.
Yes.
But I think, I think Pellicciani was given $500,000 to do a study on particulates. So, I mean, for me, having been around the block quite a while, every time they do a study for $500,000, I hope it's not sitting on a shelf somewhere. So I hope you can resurrect that.
Yeah, that's
It was
the
supposed to be the big deal in legislatively, but in the legal field. I don't think it went anywhere, but it's there. And I think it's frustrating for me because we've been talking about this for so long. In addition, I was on the same committee with Dave Kaplan, who's the fellow who came to talk to us about this whole thing, about the airport. And so what we need, and without doing any more studies, any more talking anymore, there are certain areas of our city that our citizens need to have window replacement. They need to have soundproofing. Our schools, like Federal High School in particular, needs to have some kind of, I know we have a new school now, but, I don't know how good the soundproofing is. But there are areas on Steel Lake where people can walk out the door and wave at the pilot as he's going by. Now at 3 degrees, it might be a little bit higher. He's
Yeah.
going down in. But they make the turn right over Pack Highway and 320th, and it's just the right-hand turn right there, going down into the descent to the airport. And if we put them out over the water, and Mr. Dovey lives in Marine Hills, and that affects his area much more because it reverberates off the water. So I don't know what the solution is, but, I think it would be nice to get something done. Maybe like some soundproofing.
I agree.
Or, maybe it could just go that way instead of, because we've been talking for so long. For me, I'm going to be long gone before this is ever settled. But anyway, thank you. Just
The precedent of
tell them
that
do
bill,
something. Yeah.
where the port's supposedly responsible for at least the failed sound packages and the installation packages.
Yeah.
That might be our ray of
That's
light.
what we need.
because
And for our
that's-
schools,
But then
Woodmont.
it was scaled back to just those, but originally the bill was the
I
entire
know.
6 cities.
They're more interested in the Des Moines and Normandy Park and SeaTac, and they keep forgetting about us. But there are areas around here where people are there at 2:30 in the morning when the plane leaves to go to the Orient, and that knocks them out of bed. So
at 2 o'clock.
anywhere along the sound. So
Right.
anyway, just tell them 2 words, do something.
Do something.
Finally.
That'll be
Thank
our
you.
opener in the letter, so anyway.
Thank you.
Okay, Bill, thank you very much.
You're welcome, I'll keep
I
you
don't see any
updated.
other questions, so
Thank
we'll now move over to timing of electronic fence code amendment.
Thank you.
Thank you for letting me.
Huh?
Thank you for letting me come.
Yep.
Do something. There we go. 500,000 is not a lot of windows.
Okay, good evening again. So, you guys had a public comment maybe 2 months ago from Mr. Charlie Brown asking for the city to entertain an amendment for electric fences in our city code. And so Committee Chair Dovey asked me to come and give a presentation or have a conversation with you all in terms of when we might think we might be able to get that done. And so tonight, you're going to hear a lot of details from me about why that's going to take a while. And generally speaking, that's not usually what I do. I try and get things done as quick as possible. So this is, I think you guys are going to get a look behind the curtain at what all planning is doing right now. So first off, to just be clear, any code amendment to Title 19 is a little bit more complicated than any of our other titles. It requires us to work on figuring out what the draft code should be. Then there's a SEPA decision, and then there's a 60-day notice to the Department of Commerce because it's a development regulation. So all of those things happen in addition to law review, in addition to the Planning Commission hearing, and then it gets to LUTC. So this is just letting you guys know that even if something is almost completely baked, and I'll maybe take a little bit of issue with the characterization that this particular code amendment on electric fences is done. I don't think it is. There was back and forth between staff and the applicant, and I think there's some pieces that need a lot more massaging. So what are we working on right now? So what we're working on right now, as you know, anybody bring their 3-ring binder? Mine's over there. Comprehensive plan update. Thank you both. Comprehensive plan update. You have an excused absence.
Well, I asked if I should bring it.
You did.
I was told I didn't need to. You would provide everything I needed.
I think we're going to be good tonight.
Thank you.
So comprehensive plan update, obviously, you know, by GMA, we need to get that done by the end of the year. So that's a big lift. We talked earlier this evening about the sub-area plan for South Station. It was here tonight. It is going back to council in November, so hopefully we'll get that one done. PSH separation code amendments. So that's permanent supportive housing. I think you guys know that our permanent supportive housing need went from what we thought was a reasonable number, which was about 388, up to 946. And so that 1.25 miles separation we have in our city code, it means we don't have enough space to put the number that we're supposed to plan for. So this is a code amendment to change that horizontal separation. It went through Planning Commission last meeting, and it will be in front of you guys next meeting at LUTC for conversation. Those are kind of the big things, but then we have 3 development agreements that are kind of rolling along. One's for the Commons, one's for Kids Corner, and that's Christian Faith Center, and then one for Sound Transit Operation and Maintenance Yard. So this is all stuff that's kind of impacting us right now in 2024. So then let's flip over to 2025. Okay, so besides our comprehensive plan, the state legislature passed a bunch of bills that all need to be done by June. So here, and I'm going to explain these very briefly. So House Bill 1110 is also called middle housing. And what that means is that we have to allow between 4 and 6 housing units on every single family lot in the city. That is a significant code amendment, and we're working through that right now. House Bill 1337, accessory dwelling units. That House bill says that we have to allow 2 ADUs on every lot. I don't think you guys are going to have an issue with that one, especially given the one above it, but that still requires us to do a code amendment. Senate Bill 5412, SEPA exemptions. What that says is basically if we do an EIS, we can exempt any project with housing in it from SEPA. So great. And again, there's a common theme here, and it's trying to like juice the housing production market. So, but that takes a code amendment. We got to put it in our code, so then we can talk about whether we actually want to do that. House Bill 1042, commercial conversion. That is to allow for if you had a property that was a commercial office building and it wanted to be converted into residential units. This is a House bill that says, here's all the things you need to do to allow that to happen and happen in an efficient way. Don't know that that's going to happen in federal way, but we still have to make sure our code is consistent with state statute. Senate Bill 5258 is unit lot subdivisions. And what that means, if you think about, like, let's say you're thinking about a fourplex, like 4 attached housing units. What a unit lot subdivision allows you to do is basically to create a legal parcel underneath just one unit. so that you can, instead of it being a condominium on a common piece of property, you can actually own the dirt underneath your project. That is something they do in Seattle and Tacoma right now. We do not do that. That will take a code amendment because we have to do that. Senate Bill 5258 as well also addressed impact fees. And it basically said two things. One is that your impact fees for ADUs need to only be half as much as a single-family residence. And second is your impact fees cannot be homogeneous by unit. So if, for example, a 4-bedroom house and a 2-bedroom house can't pay the same school impact fee or park impact fee or traffic impact fee. This one that's 4 bedrooms has to be more than the one that's 2 bedrooms. So that means we have to go back into our code. We have to do a bunch of math, figure out what we actually should apply, and then go into code and disaggregate by size, either bedrooms or square footage. House Bill 1293, design review. This is this was the Seattle legislation. A lot of the home builders in Seattle complain that their design review process is so discretionary that they have no way of knowing how they're going to get through it. It's random design review boards, and they take whatever they get, and it's a horrible process. And so what 1293 said is, you can have design review, but it has to be predictable and clear. And so we have to go back into our design guidelines in our code and make sure that there's no ambiguity there. And then we have our 3 happy development agreements, Kitts Corner Commons and Sound Transit. And so that leaves this group in the white in the middle. So we have electric fences, we have sign code, because we need to change our sign code because it's illegal right now. Annual code cleanup. We paid, for example, code publishing to go through city code and identify all the places we have either wrong connections to RCWs because the RCWs have changed, or yet we have inconsistencies and conflicts within our code. Just for CD, the chapters that we deal with, I got 50 pages of suggested edits. So this is a lot of stuff. We've already paid for it. Now we just got to actually kind of get it cleaned up. We have to look at renaming our city center core if we're going to ultimately apply it to the South Station area. EV charging stations is a land use. We don't have it in our code right now, but we know that people are wanting to build these things as a standalone land use, not just something in a parking lot for a Safeway. So we need to figure out how to deal with it. And then public transportation facilities in the CE zone. This is the operation and maintenance yard. We need to move it in our code up to a place where it allows us to apply industrial standards to that facility. So that would allow us to apply things like noise, vibration, pollution, everything so that it doesn't affect those adjacent property owners. All those things are super important. All those things need to happen, and they're not in little boxes because they're not mandated by the state to be done by June of 25. So my comment here for you all is we got a lot for a very small planning staff. We have a lot of things that we have to get done and a lot of things that we have to get done by a certain state mandated deadline. And so everything that's in between will get done as soon as we can. But if I had to give you an estimate of when we might be able to get electric fence code amendment to you guys, it would probably be the end of the first quarter, beginning of the second quarter of 2025. And that is,
Which is sometime in July at the earliest.
yes, sir.
That's fine with me.
I just want to let you know that was a very interesting way to get to that point. Thank you for the colors.
Could have started with that, but I wanted to get there the back way. All right.
Can you go through, so we brought this, Linda and I brought this to staff a while ago, like 2 or 3 years ago?
So we did one code amendment for them already. So, and I brought that through, and I worked with Amarok they reviewed the code. I gave them an opportunity, like, does this work for you? They said yes. You guys adopted that code, and then about 6 months later, maybe a year later, they said, oh, this code doesn't work for us. And I said, why? And it's because they want to put an 8-foot tall electric fence basically on the property line or right behind a 6-foot perimeter fence. and the code won't allow for an 8-foot structure in the building setback area. So they want the code changed, and so they started working with us about a year ago to amend the existing code that we've just adopted for them again to meet what they want to do. And it's gone back and forth a number of times, and I've had staff person that was working on this leave. And so, it is what it is, but this is the second round. I just want to make sure you're clear. This is the second
Right.
round, not the first round.
I wanted to make sure that was understood.
Yeah.
So are you telling us that you need more staff?
Is the mic on? So you guys are in the middle of a lot of conversations about staff and staff priorities and whether there's additional staff available for different departments. Every department could use additional staff. What I'm going to tell you is we'll make do with what we've got. It just means things might take a little longer than we might like. So that's the way I would answer that is.
Well, realistically, it sounds like you need more staff. I'm having a hard time with departments talking around the need for more staff. I think as a council, we need to be looking at this really realistically. I know that we can't afford staff for every department, but if we are going to add any additional staff during this budget season, I want to make sure that as a council, we know what departments are asking and why they're asking. And then we can make a more educated decision as to where we would put money for new staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
The only comment I have is, we have the state mandate things that we have to get done that are going to take everybody's efforts, and we can't be late on them. The things like the electric fence, the sign code, and the different things like that, although they might be nice to get them done as quickly as we possibly can, it seems like if July is when it's going to start to happen, I mean, maybe the person who wants it changed won't be happy, but at least it's in the pipeline, and away we go.
We will definitely try and get it done as quickly as we can.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, now our 45-minute, 800-page book. Is that where we're going?
That is where we're going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Senior Planner Evan Lewis will be leading you through this.
Okay. And how do you want to do this? Do you want to present and we ask questions, or do you want to wait till the end, or how do you?
I think we've structured the PowerPoint, so questions are at the end, but feel free
Okay.
to ask
Great.
questions whenever you'd like.
You're on.
Good evening, Committee Chair Dovey, Councilmember Tran, Councilmember Honda, Council President Kochmar, and Councilmember McDaniel and Aseva Dawson. I'm Senior Planner Evan Lewis, and this is part one of a two-part presentation on the 2024 City of Federal Way Comprehensive Plan Periodic Update. Due to the volume of material involved that you have in your binders, we have split this presentation into two parts. Tonight, we're covering statutory requirements for the Comprehensive Plan Update, as well as chapters 1, 2, and 3, Introduction, Land Use, and Transportation. And then at the November LUTC meeting, we'll cover two annual privately initiated comprehensive plan amendments, one for the Commons Mall property, map and text amendments for that pertaining to that property, as well as a site parcel-specific rezone we refer to as the Planting Flowers rezone. Then we'll cover chapters 4 through 14 of our comprehensive plan update, a new implementation appendix as part of our comp plan, as well as then a recommendation for committee action. So the city process for amending the comp plan is governed by FWRC 1980. Consistent with that, the Planning Commission held a public hearing on September 4th that was continued to September 18th, where they made a recommendation of approval of the comprehensive plan periodic update. Pursuant to that chapter, the City Council may ultimately approve the amendments by ordinance, modify and approve the amendments by ordinance, disapprove the amendments by resolution, or remand the amendments back to the Planning Commission. So what is a comprehensive plan? Under the Growth Management Act, the State of Washington Growth Management Act, comprehensive plans are the centerpiece of our city's long-range planning. They guide how we manage growth for the natural and built environment over the next 20 years. It outlines a 20-year vision for the city, and consistent with that vision, a set of goals, policies, and implementation actions that guide the decisions of elected officials and staff. The GMA requires that fast-growing cities and counties develop a comprehensive plan. In Washington State, there are 18 cities that are required to fully plan under the GMA. That includes a lot of things, but included in that is the requirement to do a periodic update of the comp plan every 10 years, and that's what we're discussing now. Our last comp plan was updated in 2015. So in addition to complying with the State Growth Management Act, our comp plan also has to be updated consistent with the regional long-range vision. That is, in our region, the Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2050. It also has to be consistent with King County planning policies. And our annual amendments have to be internally consistent with all aspects of our comprehensive plan. So there are some significant consequences if we do not adopt a GMA or regionally compliant comprehensive plan. One, we could lose eligibility for state grants, PSRC-managed federal transportation funds, and adding the ability to add projects to the Regional Transportation Improvement Program, or TIP. And to put that in perspective, just as far as the dollars that are at stake, just based on data that the Public Works Traffic Division has provided, in the last 4 years, the city received more than $100 million in grant funds that were dependent on us having a certified comprehensive plan, a comp plan certified by PSRC, as well as 11 active projects that are on the regional TIP amounting to an additional $13 million. So after our comp plan update is adopted, we will immediately then send it to the Puget Sound Regional Council for certification review, where they'll review it for consistency with the regional Vision 2050. But that is not all the consequences. It also puts us at risk of appeal to the Growth Management Hearings Board, and comp plans that are found to be non-compliant or non-consistent with the Growth Management Act are subject to potential state sanctions that could lead to withholding or rescinding of revenue from all of the different tax revenue sources that you see here. So both at the regional level, funding through PSRC, as well as the state level, there's significant potential financial consequences. So we hope to avoid all of those consequences. And so we'll jump ahead to getting into the specifics of our 2024 comp plan update. We are planning for 2024 through 2044. We're planning for approximately 11,000 new jobs and 11,000 new housing units and 20,000 new jobs, and those are our county-adopted growth targets. We have an increased focus on inclusivity and removing or reducing historical, cultural, and racial barriers and inequities, and that is a theme throughout.
Can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Is that mandated in the comp plan, or is that what we want to do?
What I just spoke to,
The increased focus on inclusivity, removing or reducing historic, cultural, and racial barriers.
that is, I think it has been, but significantly at an increased level, a requirement of the Puget Sound Regional Council Vision 2015, as well as countywide planning policies. There are several policies within those regional plans that require an increased focus on inclusivity and removing or reducing historical, cultural, and racial barriers and inequities. There are some policies that we've included in our comp plan chapters that are almost verbatim what you find in checklists, review checklists that we have to follow in updating our comp plan.
The reason I asked the question, not saying they're good, bad, I'm not making a comment on them. I'm just saying, on page 114 of the 800-page book, it said that the city's Diversity Commission and Comprehensive Plan Ad Hoc Committee, it was determined that goals, policy, and action supporting DEIA Federal Way should spread through the tropical chapters as appropriate. And I'm assuming this paragraph here is referring to this, so who made the decisions to come together? Is that how we synced it up?
That was, I think, a decision or discussion with the Diversity Commission, and that is also, it is both true, it's consistent with what we've discussed with the Diversity Commission, as well as to be consistent with the regional
Yeah.
vision and countywide planning policies.
And I understand we have to be consistent with the regional committees and everything for funding, but I was kind of surprised that it said Diversity Commission and a ad hoc committee and didn't mention the council had any part of that, or
I think that-
did I miss
I
something?
think the ad hoc committee included at least one council representative, did it not, on the comp plan ad hoc committee?
And-
Councilmember Walsh sat on the ad hoc committee, so there was at least some representation, but that was I mean, so.
And I'm not questioning,
Yeah,
I'm just trying to
no,
understand how.
Yeah, forgive me if this was a misstep. I mean, my thinking at the time was, we had a commission, being the Diversity Commission that you guys had appointed to really kind of talk about and set or give recommendations to the council on policy direction on diversity and inclusion. And so it was a simple question for them was, do you want this all in one place? We could have had a DEI chapter in our comp plan, or should it be feathered throughout, the chapters? And that they holistically said, kind of feather it through. We don't want to see it as just one chapter. And so that was just some direction we had when we started writing our chapters. If ultimately the council feels strongly it should be a different way, I think we could pivot left. It would take a lot of work to do that, but we could. So that was the decision I think we made, and I didn't think it was necessarily, the content would all be there. It's just how it would be presented.
Okay, thank you. You had a question? Mr.
Yeah, to on that point, I actually was in one of the meetings when they talked about that, and I'm curious to know, has the actual Diversity Commission gone through and looked at this 800-pound document that they've helped create?
I do not believe that the Diversity Commission has reviewed the comp plan.
Okay, and my last one is kind of illegal. Is this classified as policy, this manual right here?
So the comp plan is the policy guidance for the city. So yes, it is policy, even to the implementation, because the actual implementation items are not policy, they're actions. But you guys, by adopting this, will set that policy direction even for what should be implemented out of this.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you very much.
And that's a good transition to the second to last bullet, which is there are 4 new chapters, as well as, on top of those 4 new chapters, an implementation appendix, which in the current draft, I think there are 65 implementing actions. There's a wide range of what those actions are. Some of them are city policy changes, as well as potential additional code amendments that are even on top of the long list of code amendments that Keith walked through earlier. And those are laid out in, I think, 1 to 2 and then 3 to 5 year timeframes. And then lastly, there's a proposal to redesignate and rezone the Christian Faith Center properties, the property containing the Christian Faith Center, as well as some surrounding properties, from multifamily to commercial. That's all encompassed in the periodic update. So there are 9 existing chapters that are being updated with this 2024 update. There are 4 new chapters, as well as the implementation appendix, and then we are proposing to remove 3 chapters, city center, potential annexation areas, and the Twin Lakes sub-area plan. So with that, we'll hand it off to Keith to talk about chapter 1.
Thanks, Evan. So chapter 1 is the introduction, and kind of the highlights of what's in this chapter. We refreshed and updated all the demographic information for the city as it sat in the last couple years when we got data for this chapter. We also summarized the public participation process, and just to take a step back to what Evan shared on the last slide, we came to you guys at the end of 2021 with a public participation plan that we wanted to get your buy-in on, and you ultimately approved that by resolution. But those new chapters that Evan identified in that table on the previous slide, that was part of that, not just how you wanted us to go out and talk to the community, but also including some new chapters for the comp plan. So that was all a conversation we had in November of 2021. You know, as the introduction chapter highlights diversity, equity, inclusion, and accessibility as a concept and kind of sets that up for it being then talked about in different chapters. And this also consolidates all the policy background, so the stuff on GMA, PSRC, King County Housing-Wide Planning Policies, all of that. We used to have it in every chapter. As it's like, you know, rather than repeat it in every chapter, we just brought it into the introduction, which allowed for the overall document to be more concise. And even though it's 800 pages, it's a lot more concise than it used to be, even with 4 new chapters. So hopefully somebody other than me appreciates that. All right, so here's the vision for the city. Federal Way leads South King County as a livable, vibrant, and well-connected community. A reimagined city center and defined downtown are the heart of Federal Way and a source of pride. The natural environment thrives, businesses prosper, abundant housing options meet diverse needs, the community is socially engaged and feels a sense of belonging, and getting around is convenient and safe. The community embraces its commitment to unlocking its potential. So this is our overall vision statement in the comp plan for the community. I think it actually rocks. If you guys want to tweak on it, absolutely opportunity to do that. So here's public engagement. A lot of pictures of us on Saturdays at different public events. Over 20 meetings with community groups like Kiwanis, Lions Club, Rotary, El Centro de la Raza, Pacific Islanders School District, Bonsai Museum, Senior Center, Historical Society, Bethel Baptist Church, Calvary Lutheran Church. Kind of the list goes on and on. We did 4 citywide open houses. We did 20 tabling events and 9 surveys. We purchased an engagement platform. So before the comp plan effort, the city's Engage FW site did not exist. So we use that tool to not only provide draft documents to the community, but to also engage through surveys. There were 5 task forces, the Mayor's Ad Hoc Committee, Downtown Comp Plan, South Station Stakeholder Group, City Hall Advisory Committee, Southwest King County Trails Plan Steering Committee. And then briefings, we came to LUTC quarterly. We went to the Arts Commission, the Senior Commission, the Planning Commission, the Diversity Commission, the Human Services Commission, the Youth Commission, and the Parks Commission. So we tried to make the rounds. All right.
Hey, can I ask a
Yes,
question?
absolutely.
You know, in chapter 1, you talk, and it's a good graph you have there on 1-3. And I've always thought about this housing where we have to take 11,000 plus new housing. And what I've been reading lately is one of the biggest population groups that are having a hard time with housing is our seniors that are on Social Security that didn't plan maybe as well as they could, and they're living on $1,700 a month or $2,000 or whatever. Does that group fall into potentially the 11,000 homes because they're they are marginalized? We always think in terms, at least I do, and maybe I'm correcting myself, terms of a different group that needs this housing subsidies or whatever. But can we be, is it wrong to focus more on the senior populations as people to take advantage of the 11,000 plus low-income dwelling units?
So there's a couple pieces here. One is the 11,260 housing units, if you remember, and we'll get to it when we get to housing, but if you remember, it's disaggregated by income band. So we have bars on those bar charts all the way from 0 to 30% AMI, all the way up to 120% plus AMI. Your seniors who are on a fixed income, they're probably somewhere in that 50 AMI down to maybe 30 AMI, somewhere in there maybe.
Could be on the lower end now, more so than ever before.
And they could be. And so that's where, like, when we talk about permanent supportive housing being 0 to 30% AMI, there's nothing to say that that's not a senior who's on a fixed income who's making 20% of the area median income through Social Security and whatever pension they may have. So those people, so right now, we first look at it from just income. Now, the question that you're asking that's embedded in that is, what if we wanted by policy to make sure that particular segments of that community, whether it's age or whether it's like migrant populations, or whether it's, whatever from a policy standpoint, if the council wanted to make sure there was something specific, like say for seniors at, the lower income bands, we could clearly include some policy direction associated with that. And what that could do is it could mean that we come back to you guys a year from now and say, you know what, if somebody wanted to do an affordable senior project, why don't we waive all our impact fees for them, our park impact fees and our traffic impact fees? Because, the 70-year-old person who's making 20% AMI, they don't have a car, most likely. They're riding the bus or the train or whatnot. And so you can start to have a conversation, and the council could potentially make some decisions to incent projects to try and get housing for specific demographics.
So we could put brackets around that and do that kind of planning if we so desired as a council.
Absolutely.
I mean,
this
I'll take it to the step further than that and thinking outside the box. If we said out of the transit properties downtown, if we wanted to say it needs to be bracketed 65 to 82 years old and at this age of the money thing, how it looked out, we could actually earmark potentially a senior housing type unit down by the transit center. Is that correct?
So it's
We
not-
incent it, not mandate it, but incent it.
There you go. I think there's ways we can try and push it to that outcome.
Okay.
If that's some clarity of direction that you all have.
And if it qualify towards the 11,000 dwelling units potentially.
It would.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Okay, yes.
I'd like to follow up on that. So if we were to do something like that, and we had, shag housing or something, there are people seniors who really need help with housing, but shag doesn't fit their needs. They either don't qualify or it just doesn't fit their needs. So could we do something that would fit everyone, more seniors' needs without getting the financial help from shag to build or another corporation?
So if
Could the
there's.
city build it?
We have to own land. So you guys want to buy another piece of property, we can get whatever kind of housing you want. And I can guarantee that. But I think at this point, when it's not our property, if you guys have target populations that you would like to see more housing for, I think we can work towards finding incentives or ways to try and facilitate those types of outcomes.
Thanks.
And how would we market that to,
So once you have policy.
like, Amazon or somebody who wants to provide for?
Sure. So once you have policy direction in the comp plan, then that gives us tools to go out and talk with potential developers. Now, part of it is it's about what kind of incentives can we actually bring to the table, because ultimately any of these super subsidized housing projects, whether it's for seniors or for whoever, it's going to take a lot of incentives, both locally and from other investors like Amazon and Microsoft and so part of it is if we get some clarity in the comp plan from a policy standpoint on what you guys want to target, then let's find the incentives that we can bring. Like maybe it's we expedite permitting and you come in at the front of the line every time you come in, and getting through that permitting process quickly saves them money, and everything we can do to save them money is an incentive. Okay?
Go to chapter 2.
Chapter 2, land use. All right, so the updated highlights. So one of the things we did in every chapter is we had some chapters that had individual chapter vision statements and some that didn't. So one of the things that we made a decision on is they should all be consistent, and so they all have a little sub-vision statement now. So there's a vision statement for the land use chapter. We simplified the land use designation map, and I'll go through these with you with images so it'll make sense. We simplified the land use designation map. We moved potential annexation areas from a standalone chapter to a section within land use. So we pulled goals and policies from that standalone chapter and brought them into land use. We deleted a concept plan diagram because I didn't understand it. We removed the zoning map from the comp plan because there's no reason for it to be in the comp plan, because otherwise, every time you want to change the zoning, you have to do a comp plan amendment, which you can only do once a year. So it's a procedural bureaucracy that we had it in the comp plan. So we're taking it out. And then we propose new designation for Christian Faith Center and for South Station sub-area. That's one of the things we'd have to change if we don't adopt the sub-area plan. All right, so land use designation. So the existing designations you can see on the left. So we had 3 single-family designations, low, medium, and high. We had multifamily, commercial enterprise, so it's almost like a zoning map. There's all these different designations, and so what we did is we streamlined this to residential 1, residential 2, commercial, mixed use, non-centers, and mixed use centers. And so the reason why this is important, again, if you wanted to say go from a medium density single family to high density single family, that would take a comp plan amendment. Under this new version, it would not. It's just rezone it. So again, we're trying to make it a little bit more business friendly for people that are actually trying to build in Federal Way. So again, on the left is the existing map. It's got a ton of different colors. You can just look at the legend. Don't focus on the map itself because you lose a lot of it just because of the scale. But if you look at all the designations on the left, it's going to what it is on the right. And so it's getting a lot more simple to see, okay, where's the commercial areas? So right now, the blue or purple is commercial. The aqua color is our regional growth center and our South Station area. The pink is mixed use. And then all of this is residential, 1. The orange is multifamily. So it gets a lot more simpler to see how the land uses are actually laying out in the city. And I think it makes it a lot easier for people to do some of these little adjustments in between designations and zones without having to come and ask for a plan amendment. So residential 1, so those are basically all your single-family zones. On the top, suburban estates, and those are single-family residential, 35 down to 5. Residential 2 is the multifamily zones. Commercial is, you can see commercial enterprise, professional office, office park. The mixed-use non-centers, so that's the stuff, the BC zone is the stuff on Pack Highway. And then when we get to mixed-use centers, it's a little bit of a mixed bag here because, downtown is all city center core, but you have these other zones because of South Station. And so over time, those might change into something else if we choose to rezone. And then parks and rec can go in basically any designation.
So can I ask you,
Yes.
I have another question
Yep.
for you. We have different places here in Federal Way that people have property that's not zoned properly for what they want to do.
Yep.
The process doesn't change. They still have to, if they want to go from commercial to apartments, they would
Yep.
still, nothing would change. We're just making it easier for people to designate what they have.
So if the property is zoned, say, mixed use, and they wanted to go to, like, let's say it's Commerce Park, and they want to go to BC. Now that we've taken the zoning map out of the comp plan, and we've kind of put this together like this, you would just have to rezone. You wouldn't have to do a comp plan amendment. If it was, say, zone CE, like DBM's property, and you wanted to do multifamily, you would still have to do a comp plan amendment and a rezone.
Okay, so if you jump from commercial to residential 2 or residential 1, you got to go through the same process and do a rezone, and the council still has the authority to make the decision.
Yeah, if you want to hop a column,
Yeah,
you got to go through the council to hop a column.
okay, great, thank you.
Yep.
I had a quick question.
Yeah.
On just, is there a financial difference between the two concepts for the actual developer? Or is it just something the city has to do?
So it's time and process. So for anybody doing real estate and development, time is money. And so, you know, it's tying up property, it's, you know, you have to put earnest money down. That's why the prior to Christian Faith Center on Kids Corner, you know, we had an apartment builder looking at that. They put some money down to hold the property. It came due for another payment, and they didn't want to put more money down, so they walked. And that's when Christian Faith Center came in. So making this more streamlined, I think, does help developers because it potentially pulls out a comp plan amendment from the process.
Is it cost for comp plan or rezoning? Is there a cost? I know time I understand, but is there an actual physical cost?
There is. There's an application fee to do that, and I don't know what that is off the top of
No,
my head.
just wondering. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so we talked about South Station. So right now, as you can see, it's all commercial. On our comp plan, and what we're suggesting is we turn it into this aqua color, which is the same color as our downtown city center area. So we'd have basically two places in town that would be mixed-use centers. And then we're also suggesting rezoning Christian Faith Center, so it's about 54 acres. So it's the Christian Faith Center property, which is this parcel over here, east of 20th, and this parcel over here, west of 20th, and actually, they own this stormwater / wetland / stream thing over here. But then it's these 5 properties, which some are businesses and some are housing down at the south end. So all of this will be the operation and maintenance yard, most likely. So why zone 336? One, the change in zone establishes a clearer definition of the commercial and multifamily areas between I-5 and Pack Highway. Basically, north of 336, you have residential going all the way up to the Commons. And then once you get south of 336, you know, once this is an operation and maintenance yard, it's all commercial all the way down to 348th. The change will allow the city to utilize better tools. So our CE zone has provisions in it that really are more oriented to things like manufacturing and warehousing, things like loading docks and things like noise and vibration that you might get off the operation and maintenance yard. So moving it into CE actually will allow us to apply some of those mitigation tools that we already have in our code to the future operation and maintenance yard. And then the addition of the new CE properties, approximately 54 acres for employment offsets, what we've been talking about in that first phase down in the South Station area to try and keep our land use mixes generally about the same. That's that area that was shown in the TOD area, if you remember that, was about 61 acres. So we're going to include the PAA map. So this is our potential annexation area map. So these are areas on the east side of I-5 that are intended to become federal way at some point. And what's the reason why it's I'm a little bit less all in than maybe you all want me to be right now is because the information that was prepared for the city when we incorporated and these became ours, it's all way outdated. So for example, before we move forward on annexing any of these properties, we need to know what the revenue impact would be to the city for extending services and taking over infrastructure that currently we don't have the responsibility for. So there needs to be a bunch of work done. If you guys are ready to do that at some point in the future, let's go do it. But right now, we just moved it from a standalone chapter into land use.
I have a question on that.
Yep.
So the annexation areas, is it true that Federal Way's been assigned some of this and Auburn's been assigned some?
Everything that's in color on this map is ours. So Auburn is gray, but ours, the salmon color and the blue color and
Yellow?
the yellow and the green, those are all ours. So that's already been decided
Okay.
in moons ago.
So how much population would that add to us?
A bunch.
A lot, okay.
Like I said, the data that we have related to these, we have to go count households. We need to figure all that stuff out if we want to actually get
So,
serious about
Lake
annexing.
Haven has that, and by water connections, and I think was 20,000 people is what they had said in the past.
I was going to guess somewhere 2025 would have been my guess, so.
And do the people have to come to us to annex, or can we just do it
question.
without?
There's a couple different ways to do it. One is called a petition method, where like, let's say that a group of neighbors all decide they want to become Federal Way-ians. They could give you guys, that's a word, they could give you guys a petition requesting annexation, and then you guys could decide whether you wanted to move forward with it. The other choice is we go ahead and we initiate an annexation. When I was in Auburn, we started one on Lee Hill, and we got a neighborhood group together to meet with the city to talk about concerns and all those kind of things, and ultimately that was annexed into the city of Auburn. And then coincidentally, when I was in Issaquah, Klahani wanted to annex into Issaquah, but then when they were asked if they would take their share of the city's debt, they said no. And the city said, then we're not going to annex you. And they ended up annexing into Sammamish. So annexations are an interesting beast because it's all the personalities of all the people that live in those neighborhoods.
What about annexing something in Pierce County, like Dash Point, Browns Point, Northeast Tacoma? It's so separate, I grew up there, it's so
Yeah.
separated from Tacoma, it's never made sense that they were, part of it's Tacoma, part of it's unincorporated Pierce County.
So, so the city could straddle two counties. So Auburn is in two counties.
Yes.
It would ultimately, my guess is that those areas are currently part of Tacoma's PAA, because that's probably who it is. And my guess is that Tacoma would have to relinquish them as a potential annexation area before Federal Way could take them on as potential, but it could be done. It's a lot of politics and government stuff.
Correct. It's just, even back in the day when I was a kid, King County would come, police, fire, rescue would come to us because they were much quicker than Tacoma.
Yeah.
Yeah, we tried that with Neil Beese and Eric Faison, and Tacoma said, yeah, no.
Well, that was a while ago.
That was.
I just have a quick question on, so this is kind of new to me. So are these non-incorporated, and then
Yeah.
who assigns these areas, like?
So King County, so each county within the urban growth area was expected to assign their unincorporated areas to the jurisdiction that made the most sense. So that all happened in the early days of Growth Management Act. And so it's just been sitting here since probably like 96, waiting for us to annex it. And now Auburn at some point could say, well, we actually want the yellow area. That they would have to entertain a conversation with us in King County to transfer it from our potential annexation area to theirs.
Is it just paperwork at that point in time, or?
It's primarily paperwork to get it moved over. Actually annexing it takes a lot of work.
Okay, thank you.
Wouldn't they have to go through, there's a commission that you'd have to go through.
There is. I don't know if it's Growth Management Hearings Board. I think it might be. So there's a process that it would go through to reassign it. Okay. Oh, that's it. Sweet. I'm going to turn it over to our traffic folks.
Good evening, Chair Dovey, Council Committee members. For the record, my name is Sergeant Long, Principal Traffic Engineer with Public Works Division. And it's been a while since I presented to Land Use Council Committee. The The Transportation Chapter 3 was updated to ensure our transportation system can accommodate the expected growth. As identified earlier, about 11,000 housing and about 20,000 jobs. But the growth is not just within Federal Way, that's also include Pierce, King throughout the regions. So those growth outside the city also add traffic to our main roads such as 99, 509, First Avenue, and Military Road, just to name a few. In addition, goals and policy was updated to meet the state and regional requirements. And here are just a major highlight of the updates. We added transportation vision to the chapters, so to make sure we're consistent with other chapters. Revised the level of service standard for city center. Currently, we have two level of service standard for within the city. One is citywide, the other one is within city center alone. And with this update, we're going to propose to revise the city centers to be consistent with the rest of the city. Also incorporate the bicycle pedestrian master plan into non-motorized sections. The bicycle and pedestrian master plan was adopted over 10 years ago, so as part of this update, we're just incorporate some of the key elements into the comp plan.
So can I ask you a question?
Yes,
You know, when I read through this and we talk about bicycles, and I'll preface it, I'm a bicycle rider. I like to ride a lot. But it says here on 3-6, 2% of the work trips are on bicycles or walking or bicycles. And, you know, it seems like we spend a lot of effort and a lot of money, which I'm all for bicycling, but is that required that we are so into bicycling in our community? Because most people aren't ever going to ride their bike to anywhere. They probably don't even have a bicycle. Now downtown and in the core and all that, it makes lots of sense, but riding from Marine Hills or Twin Lakes or something, just, I don't know, but is that a federal mandate? We have to be so concerned about it?
it's the regional council, PSOC, and King County policy, essentially setting up our infrastructure for future growth. Typically, bicycle modes are used at a denser cities such as Seattle, Bellevue. Majority of workers in Federal Way, resident Federal that live here, they work outside the city. So it's a little bit of a challenge trying to bike from here to Tukwila or Tacoma. But the plan essentially is setting up a system, so if we have a denser city center or other major employees coming into the city, would allow them to use that facility.
Thank you.
Thank
Oh, can I ask a question about that too?
Yes,
So doesn't it make sense to try to get more bike routes or safer bike routes without having to be on busy roads to the transit centers? So that people can ride their bikes there, lock them up and take the train or a bus, wherever they're going?
recently we have implemented a lot of non-motorized facility throughout the city, waste finder sign, bike lane markings, and every year we're trying to make sure we update our system to accommodate or identify some safety issue that we could address.
It is scary. I ride my bike. It is scary to be on some of our streets. Kind of terrifying.
I live close to Dash Point, and it's pretty challenging trying to ride a bike in Dash because a lot of people are traveling pretty fast.
Yeah.
Incorporate the Southwest King County Trail Plan by reference that the council currently or recently adopted. Remove the 6-year transportation improvement plan and cross-section map 3-4 Associate Street section from the comp plan. The 6-year transportation plan is required to be adopted by council every year, so having that in the comp plan make it a challenge every year in order to amend the comp plan to incorporate the TIP. And the cross-section map 3-4 and the street cross-section, it's already included in our design standard Public Works Design Development Standards. So having that in the comp plan doesn't make sense at this point. Restructure, update goals and policy, as I mentioned earlier. Update maps and text, ITS plan and project as needed. As previous presenter mentioned that every chapter is required to include a transportation vision. This is the transportation vision. It's fairly long and lengthy, so I'll give you a few moments to just read them through. In summary, the Federal envisioned a transportation system that serves all users and modes of travel. And this is been presented to Plan Commission. If you have any suggestion, recommendation to revise or improve that, staff will be welcome. Good? Thank you. Since 1995, the city has adopted 3 different level service standards. Back in 95, the level standard was based on a vehicle volume to capacity ratio of 0.90. That just purely automotive, not a lot of factor going to other modes of travel. And in 1998, the next update will incorporate HOV lane or person delay. And during that year, for staff to do analysis, level service analysis for major project, it was a little bit challenged because there's more data needed for analysis in terms of getting person delay. And during the last update, PSRC and King County identified that we need to include multimodal. So during the 2015, there was a 2 zone proposed for level service standard. One is citywide, which is a volume to capacity ratio of 1.2, and 1.0 for low for unsignalized intersection. And we have a city center average VC of 1.10 for all signalized intersections. So essentially, within the city center, you can have 1 or 2 or more intersections fail, but there wouldn't be any mitigation or improvement plan to address that need because it's an average VC ratio. And multimodal level service was also a factor in the analysis. As I mentioned earlier, the proposed level service standard for the comp plan, we would keep the signalized intersection of 1.2 ratio lower for citywide. So this would apply to city center as well. And for unsignalized intersection, be 1.0 VC ratio. And also, we still incorporate multi-level service within the level service calculation.
Could you explain to the level of service a little bit more to me? I'm trying to understand it as we're going along. The V/fleet vehicle, how does that work out? Like, what is that 0.9 or 1.2? What does that mean, layman's terms?
Level service, it's almost grading system for transportation. Level service 1.0, which means you're pretty much congested. So imagine a room, if you have 100 people, and capacity is 100 people, you're based on building, you had capacity, but you still have room to accommodate additional person coming in. So essentially 1.2, you're failing.
You're over the
You're over capacity,
Okay,
correct.
understood, thank you.
Like I mentioned earlier, Southwest King County Trail Plan and Bicycle Pedestrian Master Plan was adopted by reference, and also like the key element from the over 10 years old Pedestrian Bicycle Master Plan was incorporated with key elements only. ITS plan was updated to position the city for better fundings, and key elements are adaptive traffic control, which is more optimized our signal system to accommodate various traffic demand throughout the day. Communication upgrade, fiber optic, for example. Travel information, so right now, the big thing is travel information where if you can provide information to drivers, motorists up earlier, they can change their travel pattern to avoid the congestion area. The main changes to goals and policy include replacing TG2, Transportation Goal 2, with TG6, which we add a little bit more supporting policy goals. That's in TP 6.1 to TP 6.4. We added 50 new policy was added to provide additional support to meet Vision 2044 requirements. 26 existing policies were removed because they're either already reflecting existing goals or already required by law, so it's, having them in there doesn't make sense. That's conclude my presentation. I'd be happy to take any questions.
I have no questions.
That was the end of the presentation. There was no council action tonight. That would be at the November 4th meeting. So that's the end of just this agenda item.
So I'm not sure we made our 45 minutes or not, but it's probably pretty close.
We go for another chapter?
Next chapter is Tanya's, and she's not here, so probably not a great idea. But we'll pick this up again in November, and we'll need to move at as quick a clip to get through 10 chapters in an evening. It might be a long committee meeting.
Okay, anybody else have anything that they'd like to bring up before we close? See everybody on November 4th. Thank you all, and we will adjourn.
And thank you all.